Welcome. We're doing lecture 6 in the Gospel of Matthew, and we're up to chapters 17 to 19. And what I want to do today is to look at 3 different things. From chapter 17, I'd like to look at the Transfiguration. I'd like to look at most of the discourse on community from chapter 18. If you remember, this will be the 4th of our Lord's, or of St. Matthew's rather, discourses. We had the Sermon on the Mount, which told us the lifestyle of the kingdom. We had how to be on mission for the kingdom. Then we had the parables about the kingdom. Now we've got life within the kingdom, how to live with one another in the kingdom, in community. Then the third thing I want to look at is the costly values of the kingdom from chapter 19. So first off, we'll have a go at the Transfiguration. I guess most of us would know the story pretty well. Jesus takes 3 of his closest disciples. They go up Mount Tabor, and there he is transfigured. His face shines, his clothes shine, and so on. And Moses and Elijah appear, the representative of the law, the Torah, the representative of the prophets appear. And then God's voice comes, "This is my beloved Son, listen to him." And I guess the way we were brought up, we looked upon that and preachers preached that this really is a psychological preparation for the disciples as they face Jesus' arrest and execution. Well, we're going to see it a little bit differently today. First off, though, a little word about Mount Tabor. We don't really know if it was Mount Tabor, but by the 4th century it became a fairly fixed tradition. There was the great Bishop of Jerusalem, Cyril, who, around the year 340, 345, something like that, said it's more than likely that the Mount of Transfiguration was Mount Tabor. And then this was supported by the great St. Jerome. And from that time in the 4th century, we've always located the Mount of Transfiguration on Mount Tabor. It's a fabulous mountain. When you drive up it, you're taken up by a taxi, and that's the most frightening ride you'll ever be on, because they go around corners at breakneck speed and all of that. But once you arrive at the top, the scene there is just stunning. So it has a natural beauty about it. And the beautiful thing, of course, is that from early days we still have buildings, traces of buildings where Christians from generations have come to Mount Tabor to remember this extraordinary scene in the Gospel. Of course, as we listen and watch this scene with the eyes of people from the Old Testament, we can see there are echoes of Moses going up Mount Sinai when he's going to meet God, when he's going to receive the 10 Commandments from God. Moses takes with him some companions. Moses' face is going to shine quite brilliantly. So that's a little bit in our background. And also we could remember that both Moses and Elijah, they're the 2 people in the Old Testament who are closest to God. They see God. They go up a mountain, both of them, to see God. And they experience on the mountain God's presence, a theophany, an appearance of God. When Moses receives the 10 Commandments, and when Elijah is there waiting for God. And remember, God is not in the great fire and the wind. God is in the beautiful, gentle breeze. 2 very powerful scenes that are background, if you like, for this extraordinary scene in the New Testament. So now we're going to ask, what's it all about? If we remember, right at the beginning, we have the phrase 6 days later. 6 days after what? Well, we've had Peter confess that Jesus is the Messiah. And then, when that's been acknowledged by Jesus, he starts to talk about what sort of a Messiah he is. He predicts his passion. And Peter says, no, you're not going to do it. So they've probably been thinking about this for 6 days. What's that all about? We know who he is, and he's going to suffer. So what's all this about? And now, one of the commentators says that the Transfiguration is God's confession of who Jesus really is. So in a sense, we're suddenly having the veil lifted between heaven and earth, and for a moment or two we have Jesus as he truly is. The whole Jesus, human and divine. And as we, of course, watch this scene, we go right back to the baptism of Jesus. When the heavens open, a voice is heard, "This is my Son, the Beloved, in whom I am well pleased." And here, though, we have a phrase added, listen to him. Watch him. This is crucial. This is so important to understand what God's about. Because the truth is that my beloved Son is the one who's going to suffer. So what Peter didn't understand, now God is confirming, is confessing, is revealing to us, this is reality. This is how it is. God's ways aren't our ways. This is a most extraordinary insight into this. And if we're going to understand what God is like, we've got to hold together the truth that each of us is God's beloved son or daughter, incredibly loved as Jesus was, and yet we're not going to be foreigners to suffering. So somehow or other, we're going to know suffering backwards, in a sense, as Jesus did, but that's going to be our pathway into resurrection. So for us, suffering isn't a counter against being God's beloved son or daughter. But somehow or other, the mystery of who we are, both are there. And could I just add a little word about this question of Elijah, as they're coming down the mountain and talking about Elijah. Elijah will come back, yes, that's the general belief of Jewish people at the time of Jesus, and he's going to restore all things. Well, John the Baptist, Jesus says, began that whole thing. Yes, here's Elijah returned in a sense, and the restoration is really beginning. And of course it'll be through me that the restoration really gets going. And I guess as he's saying this, he's thinking, we're thinking, well, look what happened to John the Baptist. There's a hint then of what's going to happen to Jesus. So, in this extraordinary scene of the Transfiguration, we've got an insight, really, into what life's about, what God's ways are, and how this beloved Son of God, Jesus, will know the mystery of suffering. But that's the pathway into resurrection. So Transfiguration is an extraordinary scene for St. Matthew. Now can I do the second thing, and that is, we're going to have a little bit of a look at some of the key factors in any community. And this is the great fourth